That was one of the big cases, the petitioner, the litigant in one of those big cases that you heard at this point. I'm also being joined by Mahesh Zagade, who's a former commissioner for Maharashtra FDA, Kasturi Shankar, who's an actor, Dr. Jyotsna, who's a pediatrician, and Rekha Agrawal, who's a consumer rights lawyer. Thank you very much, all four of you, for joining us. This is a conversation that will take time. I hope to delve in some points with all of you, giving ample time to each speak. Let me just come across to Mahesh Zagade at this point. Mahesh, thank you so much for joining us, sir. My first question to you: you were the FDA commissioner in Maharashtra when the first case in India against Johnson & Johnson seemed to have come out in the open. What was it that you found wrong? Do you see any connect with what's coming out in the open over the last few years to what you found in Maharashtra, or were the concerns totally different?
Me here, and let me tell you one thing. There was a complaint against Johnson & Johnson for use of ethylene oxide, a carcinogenic chemical that was used to sterilize the powder. Sterilization is required because talcum powder is very porous and it is prone to have a lot of microbial load, bacteria and other microbials. So it requires thorough sterilization. In one of those batches or few batches, they could not sterilize with the normal process of steam sterilization. So they outsourced the sterilization to another company, and where that company used ethylene oxide, which was not standard. In fact, they should have taken permission or informed FDA at that time as per the regulations, but they did not do it. Or alternatively, they could have discarded this particular batch or batches and save the consumers. Now there is when they sold these batches in the market, that means they expose people, consumers, especially children, because this is called baby powder, exposed to the carcinogenic substances. So when the complaint came in 2007, FDA did not do anything. When I joined FDA in 2011, I was going through the complaints against all the complaints, and I found that this particular complaint was not paid any attention. And I was told by officials that, okay, such complaints keep on coming. But I was not satisfied. So we investigated and we found that many wrongs were being done. And the company being $100 billion company, nobody wanted to touch it. But now pursued this matter. We got investigated by appointing a new team. And we found that there was truth in the complaint. And about 60,000 such bottles or packets were sold in the market, which was sterilized with ethylene oxide, and that exposed the consumers to the carcinogenic substance. So we showed them, we asked their response for this. They said, okay, these things keep on happening. Their response was not very proper. So we suspended, we canceled their license permanently. So that was one action that sent shock waves across the world, because to cancel Johnson & Johnson license for such thing was not heard of. But since they were playing with the lives of the people, exposing them to the carcinogenic substances, we thought
Mr.
that
Mr. Mahesh, one thing that I need to ask you, Mr. Mahesh, the license were cancelled, but the case went on to the court, and from what I believe, the court allowed them to continue with their manufacturer, to start with their manufacturer again. Could you explain what really unfolded in the court then?
Okay, this court were for 90 days, this plant remained closed. Plant in the sense this manufacture of Johnson & Johnson product remained closed. That was stopped. And then matter went to the High Court. It was debated from both the sides. But court somehow was convinced about what FDA had done. But there are certain things which are beyond, these public discussions. So what court had taken a stand that, okay, you give them one more notice and then give them chance of hearing once again, and then you take a fresh decision. And that's how the matter came back to the FDA, and then notice was to be given. But by the time I was transferred, because they wanted to buy out the time, and tell you why they wanted to buy out the time. Because I had taken action against them, another product called hip joint. Johnson & Johnson's subsidiary debut had supplied about 5,000 such faulty hip joints in India that caused immense pain and other complications in the patients. I had filed FIR against them. and of course, subsequently they sold out.
Mr. Mahesh?
So, yeah.
Mr. Mahesh, thank you for talking to us. Mr. Mahesh, there's also one more thing that I want to ask you, and because you have been a former FDA commissioner, there's no one better than to get through to you and ask you. You know, there've been so many cases that have come up over the last few months, whether it be about the masalas, the spices that we are consuming, whether it be the differential treatment when it comes to Cerelac, that's the baby food that is being used, whether it comes to the practice of sugar being used in health drinks beyond what is otherwise disclosed or otherwise considered as healthy threshold, to even talcum powder. There seems to be, on one hand, there seems to be some movement going, at least this is coming out to the fore. But is there concerns about what really is the standard in India? Because look at what's happening abroad vis-a-vis Johnson & Johnson. The number of cases, over 54,000 cases in US alone for that matter. But look at what's happening in India. Of course, it's an emotive issue. You have a lot of emotions associated in India. But where are the cases? Where are the facts? Where's the data? How can it be only in one country and not in the other country? I mean, so what's wrong? Is it something wrong with Indian standards, Indian laws, Indian enforcement, or is it just something larger?
Let me tell you one thing, that we have one of the best standards that are internationally compliant with many developed countries, and we cannot be saying that our standards or rules or regulations are weak and we cannot do anything. The 2006 Law of Food and Safety and the Cosmetic and Drugs Act of 1940 are like brought to the currency of time, and they are one of the best laws in the world. So we cannot really speak about the weaknesses of the law. Now the problem comes about the malady that afflicts the Indian regulator is that they are very weak in implementation. And they have become a little reactive.
Right.
Whatever happens, if there is some complaint and then it is investigated, or somebody abroad, they find something in that, and then the matter is like reacted and they start investigation. But the law requires that whenever such batches are manufactured, before the batches are manufactured, they have to check the purity of the raw material, and before the batches are released in the market, they have to again see that batches are proper or not. Unfortunately, it appears that the regulators across the country, and especially the national regulator also, they are not as strong in implementation, and they lack in this particular segment. My experience, personal experience with the FDA, that we can do wonderful job if we really push the administration, whatever the responsibility is given to them. Unfortunately,
Right.
we are not very much concerned with what happens to the consumer. The laws are that this should be prevented rather than action taken after the event has happened. This country should also know that
Right.
the laws are so robust that prevention is the basic spirit of the law, and not the punish the guilty, like punishment of the Johnson and Johnson. So
Right.
after the exposure and people exposed to cancer and then suffering, so there has to be prevention. One more aspect, let me tell you.
I think it's just the same issue coming out in a different form. Strong laws that exist, but the enforcement possibly becoming even harder. But Mr. Mahesh, thank you so much for joining us in such a short notice. That was one of the big cases, the petitioner, the litigant.